Welcome back. At this point, I would like to set up a contrast, that is, propose a contrast between two basic kinds of reasons for moral concern with environments and environmental issues. And this contrast, this categorization is pretty standard in the field today, though many of the papers and other texts that we read from the 40s and 70s and 80s weren't yet articulated in precisely this terminology. This terminology is now pretty standard, and it gives us a framework for what we're doing in roughly the first 4 or 5 weeks of the course, which is reviewing a debate between these two kinds of reasons for moral concern with environments and environmental issues. So one of these kinds is sometimes referred to as anthropocentric. These are human-focused reasons for being concerned with the environment. And if you remember the traditional ethical theories, utilitarianism and Kantianism and virtue ethics, apart from utilitarianism's concern with non-human animals and their pleasure and pain, those theories tended to all be pretty anthropocentric. They were focused on when it came to the guidance they provided about the environment, they tended to be focused on human concerns. For instance, there was a lot of talk about future generations of humans and present generations of humans and every human's equal right to say what happens with the environment. There was talk about, in virtue ethics, being the kind of person who appreciates environments as being a better person than one who doesn't. But these are all human focused in a way that has led some theorists, and Leopold would be a good example of this, and some of the other theorists we'll read are other good examples too. It's led other theorists to say that these anthropocentric approaches are missing something, that there are a variety of non-anthropocentric reasons, and many theorists think stronger reasons, better reasons, for caring about environments and environmental issues. So this is the basic contrast, is between human-focused reasons for caring about the environment. The paradigmatic case would be, we should care about the environment because humans need the environment to survive, or our lives will be really bad if we destroy the environment, okay? That is, we humans' lives, future humans' lives will be really bad if humans destroy the environment, okay? Non-anthropocentric reasons would be things like, it's wrong for humans to drive a species to extinction, even if that species isn't useful for human purposes in any way. It's still something that humans don't have a right to do, or it's something that's wrong. So what we want to do for the next few weeks, we've already started on the project, but what we want to do now is kind of collect some of these reasons and start to, that is to kind of get a to get a collection of arguments that we should care about the environment from an anthropocentric perspective, and a collection of arguments that we should care about the environment from a non-anthropocentric perspective. And with each set, we're also going to be collecting possible objections to those arguments. So we're going to be considering ways that somebody who isn't convinced by that reason would say why they're not convinced, okay? Or reasons that somebody would give as to why those reasons shouldn't convince us. And some of the texts we'll read will be proposing anthropocentric arguments. Others will be, most of them will be either proposing non-anthropocentric arguments or criticizing the non-anthropocentric arguments. And we're going to be going back, we're going to try to kind of get our own bearing on that debate by reading these things and watching the videos, and would encourage each of you to really ask yourself, do I think we have an obligation, or we ought to have moral concern for the environment and for environmental issues? Why do I think we ought to? Do I think we ought to primarily for anthropocentric reasons, or also for non-anthropocentric reasons? And which reasons? Which reasons are really the most fundamental or most compelling ones as to why we should care, why it should matter to us what happens with the environment and with environmental issues. Now, within the non-anthropocentric set of arguments, there are some there are some subdivisions that it's useful to recognize sometimes. So one is sentiocentric positions. These are positions that the paradigmatic example is utilitarianism. Sentiocentric positions focus on the pleasure and pain that is felt by some entity that can feel pleasure and pain. So sentiocentric positions say we should care about the pleasure and pain of anything that can feel pleasure and pain. That includes non-human animals as well as humans. But notice that that doesn't include plants, very likely, because plants can't feel pleasure and pain. If you think pleasure and pain are something that you need some kind of nervous system to feel, then plants can't feel pleasure and pain. I realize that some students may want to argue that no, plants can feel pain in some sense, but and maybe it's possible to argue for that. But I think the consensus, the broad consensus, or the way people tend to think if they do some thinking and reading about it, is that plants can't feel pain because they don't have a nervous system. So, without nerves, there's no mechanism by which plants could feel pleasure or pain, is the usual conclusion people come to. But again, I don't want to rule out that you could make an argument that plants do feel pain, or recognize at least that it's an issue about which there's some debate. The next set of views under the non-anthropocentric category are biocentric views. And these say that what is the basis of our moral concern for environments and environmental issues is a concern for living things. So this includes plants and microorganisms and anything that's alive, but maybe even life itself, something like life wherever one finds it. But it doesn't value non-living things, like remember Leopold had said he valued even soil or water, so the land itself. And biocentric positions don't think that there's a basis for our moral concern with environments in a concern for any non-living things. And then finally, there are ecocentric approaches, which say that the basis of our moral concern with environments comes from some kind of goodness of ecosystems or other natural processes as such, and this can include non-living components. So the ecocentric approaches are, in a way, the most radical of the non-anthropocentric approaches. And so if you want a very stark contrast, you can just contrast the anthropocentric and the ecocentric approaches. But I wanted to at least identify that there are these slightly intermediate positions in between the sentiocentric and the biocentric. And we'll read arguments that can be classified as one of each of these types. And again, our goal in the first 4 to 5 weeks of the course is to collect some reasons of these various types and compare and contrast and evaluate them vis-a-vis one another. So we'll be thinking about why we should or shouldn't be convinced by reasons of these various types. And there will be multiple reasons in each of these camps that we can reflect on and consider whether or not we're convinced by. And the first exam will focus on this. So it will sort of be testing how successfully you've collected and digested and understood and are able to discuss some of the main reasons in each of these categories.